In the endless expanses of the Kenyan savanna, where the sun scorches the earth and the nights are covered with stars, there lived an old ranger named Samuel Kipcer. He was over 60, but his eyes, as if carved from stone, retained a spark of youth. He spent 35 years alone in the Masai Mara Reserve, in a small acacia hut surrounded by thorn bushes, without a family or children. He found his calling in protecting wildlife. He was called the Old Man of the Savannah, a man who could calm the wind or make a hyena retreat with a single glance. Every morning, Samuel went on patrol. His old boots creaked on the dry grass, and in his hands he held a worn notebook where he recorded animal tracks, their habits and migration routes. He knew every corner of the reserve, where the zebras gathered at the watering hole, where the leopards hid in the shade of the acacia trees, and where the elephants left their heavy footprints. For him, the savannah was not just a job. It was his home, his soul, his eternal companion. One day, during the rainy season, when the sky was torn apart by thunder and the earth turned into sticky mud, Samuel heard a faint roar near the Narok River. The sound was barely audible, but his experience told him that it was not just an echo of the wind. He followed the sound, pushing aside the wet branches of the bushes, and saw it, a young lion lying in the mud. The lion was thin, its ribs protruding under its wet fur, and its right front paw was torn. Blood mixed with mud. The wound was festering, and flies buzzed around it. There were no signs of a pride nearby. The lion had been cast out, doomed to die. Samuel stopped a few meters away. The lion raised his head, his amber eyes full of pain, but with a spark of life burning in them. The old man slowly knelt down, took off his old hat, and spoke softly, as if to a friend. "Well, boy, you're clearly in trouble. Let's see what we can do." He took a water bottle and an old rag, which he usually used to wipe sweat out of his back. Moving closer, he began to carefully wash the wound, ignoring the rain pouring down his back. Lev shuddered and growled, but did not bite, as if he understood that this man was not an enemy. Samuel treated the wound with antiseptic from his first aid kit, and applied a temporary bandage. He called the station on his radio, asking them to send a vehicle to transport the lion. The rain continued, and Samuel took off his old raincoat and covered the lion with it to keep him warm. The hours passed slowly, but the old man did not leave, sitting nearby and telling the lion stories about the savannah, how he once saw an elephant save its calf from a crocodile, or how antelopes dance under the stars. When the car finally arrived, Samuel and the rangers carefully carried the lion onto a stretcher. At the rescue center, located a few kilometers from Samuel's hut, a veterinarian examined the lion. The wound was deep but not fatal. The lion underwent surgery, had the wound stitched up, and was put on a course of antibiotics. Samuel insisted that the lion be named Kaio, which meant survivor in the Maasai language. Kaio was placed in a rehabilitation enclosure right next to Samuel's hut. Every day, the old man brought him food, pieces of meat that he cooked himself, and fresh water. He would sit by the fence, look at Kaio, and talk. He told him about his youth, how he lost his brother to poachers, and how the savannah became his refuge. At first, Kaio was wary, hiding in the corner of the enclosure, but with each passing day he became bolder. His eyes, at first full of fear, began to shine with curiosity. He began to approach the fence, listening to Samuel's voice, as if understanding every word. When cold nights came, Samuel brought an old blanket and covered the enclosure with it. On hot days, he placed a bowl of cold water so that Kaio could refresh himself. Once, when Samuel fell ill and did not come for 2 days, Kaio began to growl so loudly that the whole reserve was on alert. The rangers found the old man in his hut with a high fever, and only when he returned to the enclosure did Kaio calm down, burying his muzzle in the bars. A bond grew between Samuel and Kaio that needed no words. It was a mutual understanding born of daily presence, of glances, of quiet respect. Kaio recovered. His coat became golden again, his eyes clear and his gait confident. After 3 months, he was already catching small game in the training area. By the 5th month, he had learned to climb rocks and track prey. The veterinarian announced that Kaio was ready to return to the savannah. Samuel was silent for a long time, looking at the lion. He sat by the enclosure, stroking its mane through the bars, and finally said, "It's time, my friend. The savannah is calling." The next morning the enclosure was opened. Kaio came out, stopped and turned to Samuel. Their eyes met. That look said it all. Gratitude, farewell, promise. Then the lion turned and disappeared into the tall grass. 3 months passed. One day at dawn, Samuel heard a familiar roar at the station gate. He went outside and saw Kaio sitting in the shade of an acacia tree. The lion did not try to enter, but simply looked at the hut, as if checking to see if his friend was there. Samuel smiled, took out a piece of meat that he always kept ready, and placed it by the fence. Kaio ate slowly, like a guest who respects his host's home. Then he lay down, looking at Samuel, and left when the sun rose higher. Thus began their ritual. Every few months, Kaio returned, always early in the morning, always quietly. He didn't break the fence, or growl loudly, he just sat and watched. Samuel was always ready, meat on the fence, a mug of tea in his hand, and a silent gaze full of stories. It was their sacred time, a moment when man and beast met at the border between two worlds. Years passed, and Samuel's strength began to fade. His once strong hands trembled, and his gait became slow. Doctors diagnosed him with lung cancer, incurable. He was offered to move to Nairobi, to a hospital, but he refused. "I will die where I lived," he said. "In the savannah, where every blade of grass knows my name." He tidied up his hut, he folded his blankets, cleaned his old pot, and hung his worn jacket on a hook. He ate little, often lying by the window, looking at the horizon where the savannah merged with the sky. Every morning, the rangers saw him looking at the gate, as if he was waiting for Kaio. And on one of the dry, dusty days, the lion came. But this time he behaved differently. He roared loudly and circled the gate, as if sensing trouble. The rangers noticed something was wrong, and ran to the Samuel was lying on the bed. His breathing was weak, his eyes half closed. They called a car, carried him on a stretcher, and brought him to the center at the gate, where Kaio was waiting. Kaio walked along the fence, his eyes fixed on Samuel. The old man was laid on the grass next to the fence. Hearing a roar, Samuel opened his eyes, and a tear rolled down his cheek. "You're here, Kaio," he whispered. The lion came closer, placing his paw on the bars, as if trying to reach out. Samuel reached out his hand and touched Kaio's claws through the gap in the fence. Everything around them froze. It was a moment when time stood still, when the savannah held its breath. "You lived, my friend, just as I wanted," Samuel exhaled. Kaio lowered his head and touched his forehead to the fence, as if saying goodbye. Under the scorching sun among the golden grass, Samuel took his last breath, his hand still touching the lion's paw. Samuel was buried that same day by the Narok River, where he first found Kaio. A simple wooden cross was carved with the words, "Samuel Kipcer, guardian of the savannah, friend of the lion." The rangers cried, but their tears were filled with pride for a man whose life had become a legend. A few months later, Kaio returned, but this time he did not go to the gate. He came straight to Samuel's grave. The lion lay down next to it, his mane swaying in the wind, his eyes half closed, as if listening to the whispers of the savannah. He lay there until sunset. Then this repeated itself for years. Kaio returned, lay down by the grave, and no one dared disturb him. For everyone in the reserve, he was no longer just a lion. He was the keeper of memories, the last friend of the old man of the savannah. This story spread across the Masai Mara like the wind, became a tale of friendship stronger than death, of the bond between man and nature. And every time the rangers heard Kaio's distant roar, they knew he had returned to honor his friend, as he had promised without words. Thank you for reading this story. If it touched your heart, don't forget to share it, and support our work so that we can tell even more stories about animal rescue.